He had a good profile. Not perfect. Honest. The kind of profile a man with real self-awareness writes when he stopped trying to sound impressive and started trying to sound true. Good photos. Real ones. A bio that didn't oversell. Messages that weren't copy-paste. He showed up the way a decent man shows up when he's genuinely trying. 3 months of this. 6 months. And the question that started as background noise slowly moved forward until it was the only thing he could hear at the end of each night. What am I not seeing? I'm Marcus, and if you're a man over 60 who's been doing everything right online and still getting filtered out before anything real can start, this is the conversation you haven't been able to have with anyone. Because the answer to that question is not what you think, and it's not about your profile. Let me describe something you haven't said out loud. Not the frustration of the unread messages, not the algorithm, not the numbers. Something quieter than all of that. It's the moment, usually late at night, usually after another conversation that went nowhere, when a thought surfaces that you push back down almost before it fully forms. Maybe the problem is me. Not because you're falling apart, not because you've given up, but because you've run out of explanations. And that's the one explanation left. And it's the one nobody will touch honestly. Your friends say the apps are broken. Dating coaches say, optimize your profile. Statistics say it's a numbers game. And somewhere behind all of that noise, you're sitting with a question that none of those answers actually addresses. If it's not the platform, if it's not the photos, if it's not the bio, then what is it? Brother, I'm going to answer that question today, completely. Not with platform economics, not with demographic data, with the one thing nobody in this space has been honest enough to name. I call it the invisible disqualifier. It's not on your profile. It's not in your photos. It's not in the words you choose when you message someone. It's a signal. A specific signal that comes from the interior, from the part of you that hasn't finished working something out yet. And it transmits, regardless of how well crafted the exterior is. Women in their 50s and 60s have spent decades reading people, not consciously, automatically. Their nervous systems have been calibrated by years of relationships, what worked, what cost them, what they missed and paid for. They process this signal before they process your words. The invisible disqualifier shows up in 3 forms. All 3 feel identical from the inside. All 3 read clearly from the outside to someone who knows what she's looking for. The completion signal is the most common and the hardest to see in yourself. It's what transmits when a relationship isn't the next chapter in a life that's already full. It's the solution to a life that currently feels empty. The man sending this signal isn't desperate. He's not needy in any obvious way. He's competent, self-sufficient, well-functioning in every external sense. But underneath the profile is a life that's become very quiet in the wrong way. Not peaceful, hollow. And the app is open because the hollow is loud. She can't read which one you are from your profile, but she can feel it within minutes of talking, possibly within seconds. When she senses that she would be completing you, not adding to you, she exits. Not always consciously, often as a gut response she couldn't even articulate if you asked. He seemed nice, but something felt off. Something felt like wait. Audition energy is subtler, and it shows up in the men who've done the most work on themselves, which makes it particularly painful to name. It's the quality of attention that's slightly too focused on her response. The message that's a little too carefully crafted to land well. The humor that's calibrated slightly for her reaction rather than genuine amusement. The pauses, in real conversation, where he's monitoring how he's landing rather than being present in the moment. Careful is not audition energy. Care is beautiful at any age. Audition energy is what happens when the care has shifted from I want to communicate clearly to I need this to work. When the goal of the message is no longer her understanding, it's her approval. Women at 60 have been auditioning audiences before. They've played that role. They know exactly what it feels like to be someone's performance space, and they do not want to be it again. This one lives in the past. The divorce was 2 years ago, maybe 3. He thinks he's processed it. He's talked about it. He's adjusted. He's moved on, functionally. But there's a quality in how he holds certain topics. His ex, the marriage, what went wrong, that tells a different story. Not bitterness necessarily, not even sadness. Something more like incompletion, like a file that's been closed but not saved. Research from the Relationship Research Institute found that women 55 plus filter men based not on what they share about their past, but on the energetic position from which they're sharing it. The man who speaks from inside the wound reads as someone who will bring the wound into the relationship. Not because he's damaged, because he hasn't finished the work the wound requires. She's not looking for a man with no past. She's looking for a man whose past has been metabolized into wisdom rather than still circulating as unresolved pain. Here's why the invisible disqualifier is so hard to see from the inside. Because every single form of it developed as a reasonable response to something real. The completion signal developed because his life genuinely got quieter after the divorce. That's not weakness, that's reality. Of course the house is emptier. Of course the routines changed. The audition energy developed because he genuinely cares about making a good impression. That's not desperation, that's decency. And the unfinished business signal is present because some things take longer to process than the calendar suggests they should. All 3 started as valid responses. The problem is not their origin. The problem is what they transmit when they haven't been resolved. Here's the second reason it's so hard to see. Women in their 50s and 60s are not filtering consciously. They're filtering from pattern recognition built over decades. A pattern that says, this person needs something from this interaction that I cannot give them without it costing me more than I want to pay. That assessment happens in the body before it reaches the mind, before a word is exchanged, sometimes before the first message is even read. She's not reading your profile. She's reading what's underneath it. And until the underneath changes, the profile doesn't matter. That's not a criticism. That's the most useful information you can have, because it means the work is inside, where it's actually reachable. Here's the reframe I want you to sit with. Online dating at 60 is often framed as a search. You're searching for someone. You're hoping to be found. You're presenting yourself and waiting to see if you're selected. That framing, searching, hoping, waiting to be selected, is the architecture of the invisible disqualifier. It positions you as a person whose state depends on the outcome, and that dependency transmits. The men who don't get filtered, the men who move through online dating at this age with a fundamentally different experience, have made a shift that sounds simple and is anything but. They stopped hoping to be selected. They started selecting. Not as a strategy, not as a technique to seem more attractive, as a genuine shift in how they understand what they're doing here. They're not on the app because their life is incomplete and they need it to change. They're on the app because their life is full and they're curious whether there's someone worth sharing it with. That distinction, the difference between need and curiosity, is not visible on any profile, but it transmits through everything. And here's the part that matters most. You cannot perform curiosity. You cannot fake the fullness. You can only actually build it, which means the real work isn't on the profile. The real work, the work that changes the signal, is in the life you're living when the laptop is closed. The unfinished business signal can only be cleared one way, by actually finishing the business, not by suppressing it, not by deciding you've moved on, not by telling a better story about the divorce to new women, by sitting with the actual residue, the grief, the anger, the questions without answers, long enough that they stop being live current. This takes longer than most men allow themselves. The cultural message is 6 months, get back out there, be a man, move forward. The honest message is move forward when the weight from behind stops changing your posture, not before. Action. Name the open file specifically. Not the divorce in general. That's too big. What specific conversation still feels unfinished? What question still carries charge when you touch it? That specific thing is where the real work lives. The completion signal disappears when there's genuinely nothing to complete. When your daily life has texture, purpose, people who matter, work that means something, the hollow that the app was trying to fill is already filled. And the energy of a man whose life doesn't have a vacancy is the most disarming thing you can bring to online dating. Not because it's strategic, because it's true. Action. Before your next session on any dating app, ask honestly, if nothing comes from this for another 6 months, what is my life like? If the answer is fine, actually fine, not performing fine, the signal is clean. If the answer involves a kind of dread, that's the work. The app is not the project. Your life is the project. The app is just where you share it occasionally. The audition energy dissolves when you stop monitoring the response and start staying in the actual moment. This sounds like, don't try to be impressive, just be interested, not in her reaction, in her. The question that changes everything in early online dating isn't, what should I say to land well? It's, what am I actually curious about regarding this specific person? Genuine curiosity doesn't perform. It asks. It listens. It follows the thread because it actually wants to know where it goes. Action. In the next conversation, text or in person, notice when you're thinking about how you're landing instead of what she just said. That noticing is the start of the shift. Not perform presence. Be present. They're different. And she knows the difference before you finished the sentence. I want to say one last thing before you go. The question, what am I not seeing? The one that's been running underneath everything is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's one of the most honest questions a man can ask. Most men never ask it. They blame the platform, blame the demographic, blame the algorithm, blame the women who don't respond. All of those things contain some truth, and none of them are the full truth. You asked the harder question, the one that looks inward. The men filtered out first online are not the worst men. They're often the most earnest, the ones trying hardest. And the trying itself, the need for this to work, is exactly what transmits, and exactly what she filters. Not because she's wrong, because she's been in a relationship where she managed someone else's incompleteness for years, and she's not willing to do that again. The shift isn't try less. You've been told to try less, and it doesn't help because the trying isn't the problem. The incompleteness underneath the trying is the problem. The shift is build a life so full that trying less is the natural result, because you're already whole before the conversation even starts. That life doesn't come from the app. It comes from the work you do when the screen is off. And when that work is done, not finished, not perfect, but genuinely underway, the signal changes. The profile doesn't have to change. The photos don't have to change. The woman on the other end of the conversation simply feels something different. Something that reads to her nervous system like, this man is already home. Tell me honestly, when you open a dating app at night, what are you actually hoping to feel when you log in? Not what you're looking for, what you're hoping to feel. Write it below. Because your answer is the clearest mirror you have right now, and someone else reading it at midnight tonight needs to know they're not the only one asking that question. If this reached something, subscribe. Not for the numbers, because this community is built for men willing to ask the question that looks inward. And you just proved you're one of them. This is Sovereign Male Dynamics, where the real work begins and the real answers live. See you in the next blueprint.